we're seeing the rise of the house church.
Well, let's talk about that, because you're a proponent of what you describe as open Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
It looks a lot different from your standard Sunday service, yes.
Shockingly different,
oh,
some
yes.
people might say.
There's no special building with a steeple on it.
Okay.
There's no paid pastor. We have pastors, people who have a heart for people. Mm-hmm. In fact, surveys show that about 10% of the people in the church around the world have some sort of gift of pastoring. It doesn't mean they're prepared to be professional pastors of a 2,000-member church, but they have a heart for people who know the Word, which is the basics. The churches are run by elders, of which there's usually 2 or 3 in a typical house church of 10, 15, 20 people. And so we meet in homes, or we meet in Starbucks. Do you have Starbucks up here?
We have Starbucks, yes.
And
Starbucks is everywhere.
and we meet in shops and offices and on campuses. It's all open Christianity. The biggest manifestation is the house church, where people are elbowing for room on a sofa instead of in a pew somewhere. And it's very natural. It's very much like Acts 2, where they were going from house to house and sharing the apostles' teaching and the prayers and everything. So it's a return to basic Christianity. It's not some newfangled idea that Jim Rutz came up with.
Well, I know that there are going to be many people who are watching and saying, hey, it's not church. If you don't have a church building, if you don't have a full-time pastor, if you don't listen to a sermon on Sunday, well, I don't know what that is, but that's not church.
Well, 2 or 3 people eating cold pizza in the kitchen at 12 o'clock at night, that's church to me. And it's church scripturally, because Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there. So all you need for church is 2 humans and 1 Jesus, and you have church.
Right. What are the advantages of this kind of house church philosophy?
You say we got 3 hours today?
No.
First is the freedom, because nobody is telling you to sit down and shut up and sit over there or whatever. You're expected to talk. You're expected to participate. And so, in fact, if you don't participate, somebody's going to be saying, Rhonda, you're kind of quiet today. What's been going on in your life this last week? And so it's almost mandatory participation. And then there's the empowerment, because if you're feeling weak or something, people are going to be praying for you that you would be able to grow in your gifting. I don't remember if I told you yesterday, a friend of mine named Jean was visiting a house church, and she had a shattered ankle. Okay,
no.
Well, she went to a house church meeting, Pueblo, Colorado, and the time came when somebody said, well, let's pray for Jean's ankle. She was facing an operation for this really badly shattered ankle, and it wasn't looking too good. And a little 2-year-old boy named Moses came walking across the room, put his little 2-year-old hands around her ankles, and all the bones snapped right back into place.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 years old. See? So we don't exclude anybody. Typically, if kids get bored, they'll drift out into another room or in the backyard or wherever. But we don't exclude anybody, so there's a tremendous amount of empowerment. And there are solutions for your problems. Most Christians, if you get to know them at 20 years old and see them again when they're 70 years old, they're probably going to have about the same set of problems. But that doesn't happen in house churches, because you begin to focus in on those things and get down to the really basic things. Maybe something traumatic happened to you when you were 3 years old, and that gets really deeply ingrained. But in a house church, you get personal attention, and so you have the solutions there. And there's also a great deal of adventure, because it's not just a happy face club. You're actually concerned with reaching out to the community. I would love to see Canada be the spearhead for the entire Western world in leading the kingdom and the development of the kingdom in new things, reaching out and growing. We think, although there's nobody keeping track of the statistics, that in the U.S. we might have had 2,500 house churches last year, and by the end of this year it might be 5,000. And so it's growing very, very fast. And I know you can do the same thing here in Canada.
But you're talking about even going beyond, because many churches, probably the majority of viewers watching our program today, take part in some kind of home church setting, either whether it's a weekly Bible study, or whether it's a small group, or whether you even call it home church.
Yeah, about 85% of the churches in the West have tried cell programs, at least. A cell is a subdivision of the central church, and so on Tuesday night or Saturday morning or something, people are out there doing a lot of the things that you do in a house church. But come Sunday morning, they're expected to be back in the pew again and be part of the decor and the budget and right. all that sort of thing. And so it's not really turning them loose. When you start a house church, you put your hand on somebody's head and bless them to go out and start whole networks of house church, not just one, but expanding network of house churches. And they're independent. They have their own weddings, baptisms, and funerals, and their own leadership. And so God is able to lead them in directions that are maybe not quite like what their parent church looked like. But
what about if you don't have a full-time pastor? I know that there are probably some people who are saying, well, doesn't that lead to anarchy? Isn't there mass confusion?
No,
you need that full-time pastor keeping the troops in line.
No, we have a full-time everybody. Everybody is 24/7. You know, if the pastor doesn't come really well prepared in a traditional church, a legacy church, then he'd be standing up in the pulpit winging it, and pretty soon he's circulating his resume someplace. But the laymen have a free ride. They can come extremely ill prepared, and just, you know, as long as you can hold down a pew cushion for 90 minutes and move your mouth when the singing is going on, you've parred the course. But in the house church, you're thinking all week long, what can I bring to the saints next Sunday or whenever they meet? And so it's a high involvement kind of a thing. As Marlene Dietrich once said, it's the friends you can call at 3 in the morning that matter. And that's what we have here. So if you've got a problem, I've got a problem, because we share in those things. We cover for each other. We work with each other and do all sorts of stuff with each other while still trying to remain focused on the outside, on the needy people, and so forth.
You can see why in other places around the world where we're seeing the exponential growth of Christianity that we talked about yesterday, something like an 8% increase, which is just absolutely massive.
Oh, yeah.
You can see when you have that kind of explosive growth, why you would need to go to the house church form of organization, because you can't wait to put, if the whole village is coming to the Lord and becoming followers of Jesus, you can't wait to put up a church, because they need to get together right now, and when you have that kind of growth. What about in North America, though, where we're not seeing, unfortunately, that exponential growth?
Well, you have to get small to grow big. If you have a church with 1,000 people, your chances of having 2,000 a year from now are pretty small. I mean, you really have to have some tremendous growth there. But if you have a group of 10 people in a living room, it's nothing to grow to 20 by the end of the year. So to grow big, get small. I use sometimes the example of an elephant or a rabbit. If you took 2 elephants, a boy elephant and a girl elephant, and stuck them in a closet, very big closet, of course, under ideal conditions, a year later, or 3 years later, actually, with their gestation period and everything, you'd have 3 elephants. But if you took a mommy rabbit and a daddy rabbit and put them in a closet, same thing, you'd have...
a couple weeks later.
No, 3 years later, under ideal conditions and all that, you would have, I believe it's 487 million rabbits. So that's what we're trying to do, is have a rabbit church where we can grow and reach out to people.
When did you discover this? When did you become so involved in this concept of open Christianity?
Well, the whole thing has pretty much evolved since 1985 or 1990. Up until then, the only house churches were kind of groups of rebels and dropouts sitting around licking their wounds and sharing stories about how hurt they'd been by the traditional church. That sort of negativism has almost disappeared. It's maybe 10% of the total now. Mostly house churches are really positive, and they're growing because they are positive and they're reaching out.
How has it changed you, though, this whole process?
Well, I've participated in sharing groups for a long time, going back into college. So it's kind of hard for me to separate at what point it changed, because I've been in sharing groups since, I guess, 1948, which tells you something, doesn't it?
When you look at what you've been able to document, when you look at the miracles that are just mind-boggling that are happening today, when you see the explosive growth in the church around the world, what does that tell you about what's coming?
Well, what's coming is that about 10 or 15 years from now, you're going to see twice as many people meeting in small groups as you do in church buildings. And that's not just my numbers, those are the numbers of people who know, statisticians. George Barna is coming out with a book called Revolution in another month from Tyndale House, and that will say the same thing, roughly, except his date is 20 years from now. But we're seeing an enormous shift toward interaction and personal responsibility and evangelism, and really a total upgrade of the average Christian.
James Rutz, I want to thank you so much for being with us for the past couple of days. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure being here.
I guess for me it started in 1992. It came to a head. I got to a point where I was very frustrated. And I had a great sense that I wasn't fulfilling anything in my life or in ministry. And I got on my knees to pray. And I asked the Lord to show me, what was it that's out there. I was missing something. I knew I was.
Is Christianity what I see in the Bible, or is it what I see today? And I really had a conflict in my mind because I believed in my heart so much that what I see in the Gospels and through the rest of the Word in the New Testament was what I should be living. And yet the discrepancy in my own life was I was not living that, or seeing many others at that point living that.
Sometimes when I was preaching, I would have a feeling that the church I was preaching to was not like the church I was preaching about.
With declining church attendance and increasing frustration of many pastors and Christian leaders, many have started to evaluate the church against the dynamics experienced by the early Christians. Bill Beckham, author of The Second Reformation, has intently studied the history of the church as well as trying to understand some of the obstacles to the church today.
And over the decades, we have tried to identify the problem of the traditional church in many different ways. This is one of the axioms of solving problems, is first of all, you've got to identify the problem properly in order to solve it. I think it reminds me of how we've tried to solve the problem of remembering the Titanic. It would be like the Titanic that has a hole in its side and is going down, and someone is on the deck trying to rearrange the furniture or have crowd control. Really, all of that has nothing to do with the real problem. And in some ways, I think this has been our situation with the church. We have incorrectly identified the problem.
Huge cities of 10 million inhabitants with no cultural roots in Christianity are erupting across the globe, including Tokyo, Shanghai, Beijing, Calcutta, Osaka, and Bombay. Next to follow before AD 2000 will be 7 Islamic supergiants: Jakarta, Cairo, Baghdad, Istanbul, Tehran, and Karachi. While the population multiplies and cities explode, walls are being built and Christianity is becoming more and more isolated. Even the most optimistic church leaders are lost as to how the one-day-a-week church paradigm can significantly impact the population explosion. Can the Sunday-dominated one-day-a-week church prosper in such a hostile and changing world without a major overhaul of how it operates? Bill states that some of these obstacles were introduced as far back as the 4th century.
What happened with the early church is a fascinating study. And I've been studying this kind of as an amateur historian for several decades, really. But as I understand it, the church really changed in its very nature and history in the 4th century with Constantine. And Jim Rutz has a book, The Open Church. He says every problem of the church can be traced to the 4th century when the church became an audience. And so something changed within the church. It was a gradual process, but that's when it was institutionalized. The church, in a sense, became a spectator-type situation. People went to a building on a particular day of the week, and professional leaders did something to them or for them. Some have seen the problem as the people in the pew. They're just not spiritual enough. They don't know the Bible enough. They're not filled with the Spirit enough. So we've had all these different kinds of answers to because we've identified the problem as the people. And this has not really changed what the church has been. Others say, well, the problem is the leaders, the pastors. If we just had better pastors, then this thing would work better. So let's train them better, or, as we've done for the last several decades, this pastor, it doesn't seem to be working very well, get rid of him, get another one. And so we've identified the problem as the pastor. Another way we've identified the problem, particularly this past decade, is to say, well, Satan is so strong, the world we're living in is so evil, the church just doesn't have the power to combat this, and the problem is really with the evil world we're living in. And somehow we have forgotten that Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail against my church. But we've misidentified the problem. I believe that the problem of the church as we know it is not just a problem because the world is evil or because leaders have problems or our people have problems. I believe we have a systems problem, a systemic problem at the very basic way we operate within the structure of the church. We do not have a small group context in which the church can live out the New Testament life. And so I have come to believe that the problem of the church as we know it, the traditional church, is we lack part of the New Testament system. Now, we have a good portion of the system. We have the large group context part of the system. But the problem is that we have not had the small group community context. Therefore, today I believe what God is helping us to do is to identify properly our problem. We have a systems problem. If we don't deal with the system, then we are not going to find a solution. Someone said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, the same way, and expecting different results. And I think for the time that I've been associated with the church for several decades, this is what I felt like we were doing, just kind of trying to do the same thing, do it a little better, but expecting different results. My feeling today is God is saying to us, we need to go back and renew the old kind of wineskins that includes the community, the small group, before things are going to change.
Church values are not the problem, neither is theology. The problem is the lack of a viable design through which the values and theology can be lived out. This is where the cell church movement steps in.
Everything was fun, if you measured it in light of how the church is doing today, but there was still an emptiness inside. There was something missing. So I resigned that position, and I started with 3 families in a living room, and I said, we're going to do this. We're going to live it.
And I came back to the office, opened up, or sifted through my letters, and one was a letter from World Team. I never heard of World Team before. It was new to me. So I filed it and put it in the waste paper basket, as probably most pastors sometimes do with those things. And something impressed me to take it back out, open it up and read it. And I did. I took the brochure out and it said, Cell Church Conference. Opened up the brochure, and inside it asked questions of, what are you looking for? And for each question that was listed, I answered yes. This was what I was looking for, and so I was invited to come.
It's often asked, does a cell church concept work here in Canada? Or normally it comes out in a negative sense that it will never work in Canada. And I argue that point. I argue it because I believe I'm living proof. St. John is a city of churches. When I started this brand new church, I had several pastors come up to me. They know me personally. I've been born and raised here. Barry, why start another church? Is the last thing we need. And my answer would be, well, there's 70,000 unchurched people here. Who's touching me?
And not long after he began to teach, it was like a light came on inside, a light bulb. And it was like my whole inside was lit up. And I realized at that time that what I had been searching for 2 years, I had now finally found. I found a way to do evangelism. I found a way to experience real, true Christianity. And I could never turn the light off again.
I have experienced a lot of personal growth especially in the last 2 to 3 years since we entered the cell life. And the Lord has just done just tremendous things. It's very hard to hide your personal problems and your personal strongholds from a group that you are so closely associated with and so accountable to, and things become apparent in that cell group that need to be dealt with. And when you know you're in a place that you can trust your leadership and you can trust those that you're in community with, you are more prone to open up, which is what I've done. And there's been so much freedom in my life. I'm really a different person. My husband will tell you I've just come so far as the liberty in my life and the boldness and the level of depth in my life has really, really changed.
The big difference that separates us from just having Bible studies and home group prayer meetings, cell life is the church life. It is the backbone of our church. Coming in Sunday morning is a celebration service that we worship and celebrate Christ. The message that I give is more motivational, inspirational, and as we meet throughout the weeks in each other's homes, that is the backbone of who we are. It's a time that we invite the presence of Christ in our midst, and wherever Jesus is, His presence is there, and where His presence is, His power is there. And that's really our purpose statement when we are seeking His presence, to receive His power, to obey His purpose. That is what drives us on.
My participation in the cell church has had a dramatic impact in my own life, personally. I think the first thing is that it has given me a context in which I could really live out the one another's that I saw in the New Testament, loving one another, bearing one another's burdens. And so the impact that it's made upon me is that I have been able to really participate in what I feel like is New Testament life.
It's just a strong statement that we are about winning the lost. We are about reproducing. When a cell group starts, it has a lifespan. It has a lifespan of 12 months, 9 months to 12 months. In that purpose, in that time period, they have one purpose: to reproduce themselves. I believe that healthy things reproduce.
The Lord's stirring up an evangelistic gift within me to win souls, and I really feel that He's coming soon, and that's the whole purpose. We're to be His hands and feet and to tell people about Him.
And what's happening is that as they go to their jobs, as they go to their family functions, people want that glow, whatever it is. People want that confidence, that peace, whatever it is. And I believe the same thing happened in the early church, dealing with the pagan Roman Empire. That the passion and the vitality of being introduced to Jesus Christ and His presence changed a nation. And that's what I'm seeing in this old incorporated city full of churches and tradition and religion, is that people are being introduced to Jesus Christ and sharing it with their friends.
And I think also an impact has been in the process of sanctification, because what I have come to discover is that sanctification really, in a New Testament sense, is impossible apart from a small group experience. And so sanctification in my own life, and God helping me to grow and to mature, has been related to other people and sharing with them and listening to what God is saying into their hearts and lives about who I am, and both my good points and my bad points. But that's what sanctification is all about.
And a lot of this equipping track, if it's not done properly, means that people will not catch the values. If people don't catch the values, then people won't change. And we believe that it's very important to catch the values of Christ that we may change. So we're very detailed on going through the proper training, getting the word and the truth within a person's heart, that they'll be changed.
Another way the impact has been in the expectation that in a small group context, truly evangelism can take place in my life and through me, and that I can have an opportunity in a natural way to touch people who are not believers and to bring and incorporate them into the small group and into the church. And so the impact that's been made upon my life, I think if I were to sum it up, is that I feel like I have been able to live out the flavor and the life of the New Testament church personally. And that I never felt before.
So that was a mistake I made, trying to make things easy. Don't try to make it easy. Carrying a cross all day is not easy. Discipleship is not easy. It's dying. It's being a martyr for Christ. And I believe that in doing so, the next generation believer will make an impact on your city, your nation, as we see them discipled in the things of Christ.
It's something that has really caught a hold of their heart. And God is now doing in their heart what He has begun in mine. And that's very exciting.
For myself, I know that two of my major concerns, Jesus gave us a great commission, make disciples and to win the lost. And it seemed to me that we were full of church people, but not too many disciples. And a lot of the people that we were reaching, when we were reaching them, were just coming in, but then we were giving them a class and say, okay, there you are, you're on your way. And seldom saw accountability and the fellowship and the discipling and the equipping. And it just got in my heart that this is what we need. This is what I guess God was putting in my heart, was seeing the lost one and really reaching out.
Well, for me personally, I always grew up as a shy person and I didn't really express myself. But when I got into the cell, I opened up more and there was accountability there and my life got straightened out a lot as well. And I've been able to open up my life to other people and just express myself and just use the gifts that God has given me.
But the results have been so worth it. The changes that we've seen in people's lives, in our own lives, and the outreach potential to the unsaved is absolutely tremendous. And I would just highly recommend to anyone that's having misgivings about whether or not this can work in their church, it can work if you're willing to totally commit yourself. If you feel God has called your church to this, He will give you the people and the resources and the strength to do it. My husband has a saying that, you work until God tells you to take a rest. I think he kind of coined that from Ralph Neighbor, but it's very true. And the energy level that we have to be out doing the things that we need to do is so much greater than it was just doing the program-based model in our church. And the Lord is faithful when it's time to say, okay, I need a rest. He does tell us. And I just highly recommend anybody that's thinking about this to really prayerfully consider it. I feel it's what God has called our church to. I know it is. And in spite of the hard work and the commitment, the benefits far outweigh any commitment that you may have to give.
Your spirit is mine.